Hey there, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how I took a simple can of Japanese sake and I turned it into a commercial that looks like this. Okay, so first and foremost, before you begin to record anything, one of the things that I would suggest for you to do is that if you are going to be doing something similar to this, where you want to showcase your work, or if this is already for paid clients, you want to make sure that you do some due diligence and do some research on the company, do some research on the product itself, how it's made, the quality of the product. Make sure you understand the culture, the target audience that the product is for. And the reason for that is so that you're able to craft your story about the product, so you can craft the imagery based on those things so that you can actually stand out. And when something is cohesive or it's in alignment with that particular company and how they do business and whatnot, it actually makes you stand out better than anyone else that just put things together, winged it, and they didn't really care. So let me really quickly show you what the simple setup for this scene is. Okay, I knew that all I needed was the spinning can in space, okay, because based on my vision of this quick commercial, everything else in terms of B-roll and graphics, I was going to go ahead and create that the majority of the video itself, or the majority of the work. So all I needed was the spinning can. So obviously I have two sawhorses, and as a tabletop I'm using this piece of plywood. I have made a hole there so that I can insert the can with the dowel that I glued onto it, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment. In any case, I have the for the main light, I have the Godox VL200, and just as a additional bounce so that it fills some of the right side of the can, to give it a little bit of a fill on this side. Since obviously the can is black, I just wanted to have a softer bounce and a little bit more definition on that side. So that's the reason for the bounce card. For the background, since I knew that all I needed was, just, like I said, the spinning can in space. So I knew I'm going to cut it out, or key it out actually. I'm using a green screen. So in this case, the green screen, I have it flanked with two lights. Both of them are Godox SL60Ws. One thing that you just want to make sure that when it comes to green screen or blue screen, whatever it is that you're using, make sure that you minimize the hot spots, and that you also minimize the amount of shadows and stuff like that, and make sure that try to avoid green screens or blue screens that have wrinkles and all that stuff. This one does have a little bit, but you know, the frame itself is pulling it taut, so it doesn't actually show on camera. But just make sure that it's pretty much stretched out and you don't have like really bad wrinkles on the green screen, because it gives you better results, and you're not having a hard time keying it out. That's the setup for the camera. I'm using a Canon EOS R with a 100 millimeter macro lens, because obviously the can is pretty small, and I just kind of like wanted to zoom in and just showcase the name, which is Soto, which means outside, and also the white dot and some other minor details or little details that you see on the can itself. Okay, so the reason for the dowel is because I needed something to spin the can, okay? And one of the things that I'm using, okay, is a very basic tool that, you know, a lot of us may have at home, and it's a drill. Yes, I do have an automatic turntable with a remote control. I could have easily just plopped it on there and have the thing spin, no problem. But I just wanted to showcase a variation of different things, because sometimes we don't have a turntable or a lazy Susan or whatever the case may be. And sometimes you gotta get creative, and therefore, with a simple drill, a dowel, and some hot glue, you can accomplish the same thing. Okay, so let me quickly show you how I shot this scene. It's very simple. I'm sure by now you can figure it out without me doing anything, but let me show you anyways. So the can itself, I went ahead and I glued the dowel to the can with a hot glue gun. And then I went ahead and I taped some green tape on the dowel itself. Now, a lot of editors, they have what is called the wire removal, where you can just, take the stick out or whatever the case may be, or the dowel, without having to put tape in it. But I just did it anyways because I bought a whole bag of dowels, so I figured I have some normal ones, and then I have a few that I wrap tape just to make it easy. And the reason for the green tape, obviously, is because from the camera's point of view, it's gonna blend in with the green screen, and it's gonna make it a lot easier for me to key it out with just a couple of clicks, no problem, whatever. You don't have to do it, extra steps, but hey, I had it, who cares, done, you do whatever you like. Okay, so I went ahead and attached the dowel to the drill, and basically what I'm doing is I'm bringing it up so that it's in view of the camera, and I'm looking at the monitor on the camera. Obviously the camera is capturing the scene from this point of the dowel up, okay, because I have it at that height. So none of the tabletop is showing right now. That's the reason why I put the green tape all the way down to the bottom, so I can raise it to whatever level I need without showing the top of the plywood. So in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and just spin. Let me turn it the other way, even though you can, obviously, it doesn't matter whether you spin clockwise or counterclockwise, you can always reverse the video footage. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a few spins. And I think that's plenty. Now, depending on how you're shooting, whether you're shooting at 60 frames, 120 frames, or 24 frames per second, depending on what you want to do, then if you're shooting at 24, then and you know that you're going to need it to go somewhat in slow motion, then you just go at a regular rate. If you're using 60 or 120, if you go a little bit faster, it doesn't matter, because you can always slow it down in post. But that's basically all I needed, okay? Just to spin it, and then everything else I'm going to do in post, and I'll show you.
So now that I'm done shooting the footage of the can and bringing it into post, I'm going to show you the steps that I took to get to the final result. Now, I used a few different programs to get there. I'm going to show you those steps, but I am not going to show you a step-by-step how-to tutorial of layer by layer on how it was done, since, once again, I used a few different programs, and of course it would make this video very, very long. If any of you are interested in what is it that I did in Illustrator, how I got that accomplished, what it was the next step when it came to Apple Motion, and then the final edit, which is with Final Cut Pro, I can definitely show you that. If you leave a comment or questions down below, I'll be more than happy to create a video where I can show you these steps more in depth if it's something you're interested in. Now, backtracking a little bit, when I was shooting the video, I mentioned to you that it was always a good idea to look into the company, look into the product, look into how the product is made, where it's made, and what their culture is, who their target audience is, and all of these things. So one of the things that I did is I went into sotosake.com, and as you can see, their website is very clean. The way that they display their products is in a very clean, very crisp, very simple. And so these are all the factors that I took into consideration when I did the video. So obviously right here, they give you some snippets of information about the product, what the meaning of Soto is, how is it that what are the main ingredients for the sake. Okay, so they give you a little spiel here about the specialty rice that they use, the pristine mountain water from the Niigata prefecture in Japan. And so they give you some information on it. So this gives you quite a few clues or ideas, perhaps the best way that you can possibly showcase their product, right? and who their audience is. I took some information about the different ingredients they used, the little hints, nougat and apple and all these things. So I took all this into consideration in how to be able to craft the final video that you saw. So this was basically one of my first steps. Okay, so the next step, I went to Google and I searched for the Soto Sake logo. So obviously all these photos came up and the way that they're presented here. So you can see it's very minimalistic, very simple, but at the same time it's very nice and elegant. My main concern was to find a sample of their logo. I found it here. This is a 1480 by 494 size logo. Apparently this is supposed to be a PNG, which means it's a transparent background. Whenever you see anything like this with little checkered backgrounds, that's basically what it means. There's no background to this. Although other situations that I've had in the past that let's say that I've downloaded something like this, the background was this little checkered background. It wasn't really a PNG. It was more of a JPEG. And so of course, you know, if you need to have just the logo itself, then you have to remove that background, whether it's in Photoshop or whatever it is that you use. Once I got this, I went ahead and I transferred it over to Illustrator. In here in Illustrator, for whatever reason, the logo, it's in a kind of like in a photo format, whether it's a JPEG or whatnot. Sometimes, obviously, like I said, you can get lucky and it'll be right away, it'll be just a transparent background. But one thing that I normally do is, regardless of the size that I'm able to find, even if it's a larger size, I need to turn this into a vector. And a vector file basically means that I can go ahead and stretch this logo, make it as big or as small as I want, without it degrading, without it pixelating, without it losing any of its high resolution. So for example, if I take the S and I went ahead and make it really, really big, as you can see, those edges are still very nice, very crisp, because it's in a vector file. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. When you bring it into Adobe Illustrator, and if it's in a JPEG format, or let's say that this one had a background, then normally what you would do is do an image trace where you would make and expand. Obviously right now it's grayed out because it's already been done. So it's not going to let me do it because it's already a vector file, and it's already, even though it's a white background, it's already in its own separate layer. So in this case, I have obviously the word Soto, and I also have the white circle that you see on the actual can, that I wanted to have all those little details that I can use if I wanted to when it came to creating a motion graphic for it. So basically in this particular file, I have the individual white circle, the dashes, and obviously the letters, and these are all in one layer. What I like to do is I like to have each one of these elements in its own separate layer. First of all, if it's all grouped, you want to ungroup it so that they're all, you can individually move them if you need to. So in this case, if I wanted to move that there, I can do it. I can put it back, right? Right now it's ungrouped. So that means that each one of these, I can move it wherever I want without affecting the other. If I were to grab the whole thing here and group it, then that means that if I move this, the whole thing moves, okay? But in this case, I don't want to do that. I just ungroup it, and they can all be moved once again individually. Now, because I knew that I needed to do a motion graphics, and I'm going to use, or I used Apple Motion to do the motion graphics, I knew that I wanted each one of these, as I said, individually in its individual layer. And so what you do is highlight the layer. Obviously, I've already done this. You highlight the layer, and then you come up here, and then you choose what is called Release to Layers Build. And so what that's going to do is it's going to take each of these individual elements and it's going to put it in its own layer. And the reason why you have to do that before is because if you take it into any other program, for example, Apple Motion or Adobe After Effects, in order for those programs to be able to see these elements as individuals, they have to be put in its individual layer. If you don't have individual layers and you just, let's say that you save this and then you transfer it into Motion or into Adobe After Effects, it's going to look at it as one layer. So one whole thing. Unless you're okay with that, whatever it is that you're working on, where you're going to do an overlay with it, then that's okay. But if you wanted to manipulate things like I wanted to, then you put it in its own individual layer. And that's what that creates right here. Okay, so now that the individual elements of this logo has been put into its own layers. Then it's time to export it in such a way that either Adobe After Effects or Apple Motion are able to see them as separate layers. You can go to File, scroll down to Export, and then Export for Screens. Now, I have already done this previously. That's why it already pre-populates here with what I exported. In this case, I exported the entire logo, but then I also exported each individual piece or layer. You know, you have the letters here, but you can always come here and you can edit. In my case, I just wrote it in as an S, so that when you're in the other programs and you're looking at your assets, then you will know what it is. I mean, obviously the S is an S, and you know it'll show you that, so that's not a big deal, but just for the sake of being organized. Now, in my case, obviously there's 2 O's in Soto, but I only need to export one because it's the exact same thing, so I can duplicate that asset. Same thing with the dash, and of course part of the logo on the can is this white circle, so that's why I have that too. So then what you do is you can either click on all asset, it'll highlight all the assets, because if let's say that you just choose one, it's just going to export this one, so you want to make sure that you check off everything that you want to export. And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that the format is in PNG. So you come down here, normally it'll default, but for whatever reason, if it's in some other type of file, then obviously you want to make sure that this is in PNG, because you want to have an individual background so that this, obviously your assets can overlay over anything that you want. So make sure that that's PNG if that's what you need. And then all you do is click on export asset, put the file wherever you want it to go, whether you want it on your desktop or wherever it is. So that is the basics of, you know, creating these individual assets for manipulation. So the next thing is to go into Apple Motion, because that's the program that I used. To get started with Apple Motion, you open the program, you click new. When you click new, in my case, it'll open up the beach ball of death, and I'm just gonna sit here until it decides it wants to cooperate with me. But once it does, it'll open up this window, project browser. There's different things that you can do with Apple Motion. I'm not gonna get into that right now. Right now, basically, we're just doing a motion project. Right here, you can choose the type of frame rate that you're using for it. So you choose whatever you want. You could also choose the duration. So you can just type in the duration that you need, whether it's for 10 seconds, 15, 20, whatever it is. This one is defaulted to 20 seconds, but obviously you can put in whatever you want. And also, what is it going to be broadcasted in? So whether you want it to be in 1080 or you want it to be in 4K, then you choose whatever it is that you need. Okay, I'm not going to open up another one because I already have the previous one. So, but that's how you basically get started. Obviously, you hit open and it'll open up your project with a clean project window. So obviously none of this stuff is going to be here. It's just going to say project and a clean canvas, and you can get started with this. Once again, I'm not going to get into the intricate details. This is not a step-by-step tutorial. Once you start up the project, you can bring in your assets. In this case, I brought all the assets that I generated with Adobe Illustrator, as you can see. So it has my dash, the O, and all that, and also the asset or the layer that has the entire Soto logo on it. Now, at first, I was going to do something kind of showy, intricate, and this and that, but then I thought about it and I said, you know what, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to make everything simple, since as you saw on the Soto Sake website, everything is nice, clean, you know, not a lot of bells and whistles and stuff. So I decided against all the showy stuff that I was going to do, and I just decided to stick with the Soto or the entire Soto logo. But I have the individual pieces if I wanted to do something else later on. So in this case, it's very simple. It's on a blue background. So you have your project, then it creates a group with whatever it is or whatever assets you bring in. But I have checked off just the layer with everything on it. You have your properties, behaviors, groups, and all that kind of stuff here. So this is where you make all those changes. So what I did is I just made this layer visible here. As you can see, if I start clicking around, it's going to start adding all the other layers. Okay, so they're just sitting there for me to do whatever I want. But in this case, I just wanted that one to show. So the next thing I did is I went ahead and I added a light. And the way that you do that, if this is sitting here by itself, you just go to add object. You can add different things. You can add a camera so that you can make dynamic moves if you need to, or add a light. And so in this case, I added a light. So the light that I chose, and just to go to the parameters, it'll tell you here what it is, right? The behaviors and all that for the light. In this case, I chose a spotlight because you can choose different types. Once again, I'm not gonna get too much into this, the color and the intensity and all that, that's all set. Once I added this light, all I wanted it to do is for this light to basically go from off screen, start off here, and then make its way across, illuminating the logo and go all the way across until it went off the frame on the other side. I just wanted this simple movement. I just wanted it to do about, let's see what the total is. And the total amount of time for that to sweep by is 6 seconds. So in 6 seconds, this light is traveling from one side to the other. And that's all I wanted it to do. So obviously what I did is I manipulated the intensity. And this is how you're able to either raise the light, move it to a different position, or turn it. So in this case, you can move it, right? You can move the light. You can make it go and manipulate it any which way you want to. Okay, in my case, I just leave it as it is. And so I also adjusted the intensity, how much of the logo was supposed to be illuminated as it swept by. So that's all I did. The next thing you do is export this, and you export it as a default .mov file. So it's a movie file. And if you choose to convert it into an MP4, you can do so if you like. So that's basically it. I mean, it's really simple. It's just a nice clean sweep. Export the movie portion of it. And then I took all of those elements, put it all together in Final Cut Pro. Okay, so we're now here in Final Cut Pro, and I have already started the project. The way I have it set up is in 1080p at 23.98. You can set it up in whatever it is that you need, whether it's 4K, whether you need it to be in 60 frames per second, or whatever it is that your needs require. I wanted to have a clean transition into the video. So I have this portion of the video start with a black background, then the video obviously begins. I have it set up with these 3 layers. So the bottom layer is basically a footage, and let me go ahead and disable the top one and this one here on the very top. So basically I have 3 video layers. Okay, so what I have here is I have the intro with black slate or a black background. I didn't want the video to start from there, right, where this rice is being shot into the frame. So it comes in from the black frame, and I have obviously 3 layers here. So the background layer is this layer of the rice that is coming into the water. And so what I did with the motion graphics that I created is I actually created 2 layers, and I'm going to enable this one, which is the bottom one. And as you can see, as it progresses, obviously you see that light that goes through. And that's what I created in motion graphics. So I brought it in. So the next step I did is I took that same graphic and I layered another one on top of it. And I'm going to enable it now. You see it right at the top. So I took this layer and I flipped it upside down, and then I relocated it so that it was on the top side of the frame. So as you can see, you see that one on the top, one on the bottom. Lighting effect is basically just going across each other and on opposite sides. So that's how I created that intro. Next up, what I did was I started introducing the elements based on what the Sotosake website shows, right? So on the website, it says that it's made with pristine water. So you see that's where the water is flowing, nice and crystal clear. Obviously the rice, which is what was introduced in the beginning, but also it says that it has hints of cucumber, melon, and apples. So I just wanted to kind of showcase those one on top of the other. But the apple video, which is on the left hand side, I positioned it, adjusted the crop so that it would appear on the left side of the screen. Then I put the cucumbers on the right side of the screen. Actually, it doesn't matter whether this layer is sitting in the middle or this one is sitting at the bottom. It doesn't really matter because I cropped the apples to the left, the cucumbers, I cropped the video to the right, and I cropped the melon so that it's cropped to the middle, and so it showcases these ingredients. What I also did is, because of the fact that it automatically puts a black background, or I wanted there to be some sort of separation, so what I did is I put a white background right underneath all of them so that it would create this white border separating the different scenes. Okay, so next up, what I did is combined all these 3 layers of video. This is actually what they look like. Okay, so you see the apples dropping into the water, then you see the cucumbers coming in, and then lastly the melon that comes in. This is what it's called a compound clip. So this compound clip is what made this the scene that you see here. And then I played around with the effects so that one scene would overlay with the other and combined the way that they did right here. And then I created a compound clip, like I said, from that. So next up is the actual can that basically it's rotating in space and it comes into view. When it starts off, it starts to spin. So what I did with this, I actually take a look at it. So it comes in, spins out, and then it moves to the left of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and disable the underneath layer. Okay, so this is the screen that you see once I have keyed out the green screen that was actually in the back of the can. I cut out the can, and now it's sitting by itself in space. Okay, and so what I did here is, as it's rotating, I added some motion blur so that when you see it rotate, there's a little bit of blur that happens as it's spinning from the back to the front, because obviously the whole idea is as it's spinning to the front, then it comes into focus. So that's this portion. And then what I did was, once again, in keeping with the theme of the water, pristine water from Japan and all that good stuff, I went ahead and I added this additional clip in the background. It's rotating from the back and it's coming forward. Also, the water is propelling forward along with the sake can. Okay, so that's that portion right here. And then what I did is, once it gets to this point, the can freezes in space for a moment and then it goes off a frame. And this is where this part gets introduced. Basically what this is, that circle that I showed you, the white dot that I showed you from Adobe Illustrator. Imagine the dot being right in front of the lens, then moves forward in front of the lens, and as it moves forward, comes into view. So the dot goes from taking all the lens area and just showing a blank frame to moving out or moving forward into the dot. So you see, so then it moves into the dot right at the precise moment where the can shows up again. So it's kind of like coming off a frame and it just zooms in, just goes into that dot in front of the can. Okay, so the final thing is where the can basically moves from the center of the frame and it moves to the left. Then there's a spray of pristine Japanese water, I guess if you will, comes into view, and then it begins to fade. As it fades, the word kanpai, which means cheers in Japanese, is introduced. And that's how it ends.
So this was my process on how I created a commercial for this Japanese sake. I know that I didn't go into a very detailed process when using each of the programs that I used to create this commercial. If you are interested in finding out the actual steps, either for Illustrator, Apple Motion, or Final Cut Pro, please leave a comment or questions down below, and I'll be more than happy to create a video for it if enough people are interested in finding out how is it that they're used. For the sake of disclosure, I just want to let you know that the video B-roll that I used to create this commercial was provided by Envato Elements. I am not being paid or being sponsored by them. Also the same thing with Soto Sake. No, I'm not getting paid by them. I am not getting sponsored by them. As a matter of fact, I bought the product with my own money. It's just something that I want to create for educational purposes. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this video. If you found it somewhat entertaining or educational, please give it a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can get alerted to future videos that I put out. In the meantime, thank you once again, and kanpai.